Hey guys, it's Abby from Abby of Pellinor, and today I'm looking at some more book covers, but this time we're looking at the original cover versus the change. A lot of covers, of course, get changes over time. Some of them are because they are classics, whether modern classics or classic classics, and so of course they want to change the cover with the times to keep getting new audiences to pick them up. And some of them, they just kind of realised that they didn't pick the best cover to begin with. That's what happened with our first one, so let's get into it. And that is Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. I've not read this series. I've heard amazing things about it. It's a YA fantasy. I've heard absolutely fantastic things, but I don't think it's for me, which is why I haven't read it. What is that original? Is that meant to be shattered glass behind her? Because it's so shattered that it just looks like a glittery spread effect. Like the line in between the splits of the title, the Shatter Me. If they'd made that more jagged, that would have been a really good concept. But like, what? What even, who signed off on that? Whereas the new cover, I don't know how eyes relate, but I think they might have a big theme in the book because every single cover since has had these, like, just an eye in the middle. But whether it relates or not, I also just think it's so much more beautiful. So of course it doesn't have the shatter aspect to it anymore, but we do have this beautiful cloudy background with this eye with a waterfall from one part and tree branches, naked tree branches from the rest. And it's just so much more evocative and so much more eye-grabbing on the shelves to make you want to go pick it up. Next up is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. They did a new set of cover releases for this, I believe because they're actually finally rebranding this as adult rather than as YA. Why it was ever down as YA, God only knows, but they've changed it. And so they have the new covers. Now I have two big issues with the covers that are separate kind of to their intent. The first one is that the series is still continuing and yet they're not going to be releasing the new books in the old cover style. What? Like, I don't even read this series. I have the first book. I read the first one. It was enjoyable, but it's not my sort of thing. I'm just with so many books, I'm not going to pick it up. But I have the first one in the first cover style. Why would I then want them to not match? Like, at least with the Bone season, when they did this, they had a limited release of the old type so that if you really wanted them to match, you could still get it. But they don't seem to be doing that at all. They only seem to be having their new covers. And then secondly, the drawing styles on all of them are very evocative of like ancient Chinese is what I think of when I see them. But these books are so white. Like, these books are so white. And that's like a thing in and of itself, put that to one side, but why have you put that on the cover? But then, just judging the two colours based off of each other, I actually, if you took out the face on the old one, so if you had it just cropped slightly lower, I would prefer the old cover. I'm not keen on faces on my book covers, despite what I've said in previous editions of this series, shut up. But I prefer to not have faces on the cover most of the time, and I like the font used. I like A, of and being inside the O's of the words. I think that was well done. I like the kind of wire that wraps around. I think that's really gorgeous. Whereas the colours on the new one seem to clash, like the yellow with the red. Like, even though it's a faded red, it's quite a clashing colour, and it's just very basic. And maybe that was their intent. Now they're like targeting it towards an adult audience. But I'm 24. I'm technically their adult audience. I'm alright, thanks. Weirdly enough, I'm gonna pick the old one for this one. Next up, for a classic, it's George Orwell's 1984. Now, of course, this was published in the 40s, so it's had a few different iterations of covers, but I'm going to have the old one as the standard white cover with the big eyeball, and versus the new one, which is a more stylistic choice, which also still has an eyeball. But yeah, this has been released in a mass market paperback size, which usually I don't like, but I actually have this one. I actually have the mass market 1984, and I do prefer it over this like more original style. They've still got the eyeball, but it's much more humanified versus just a literal eyeball. And then the red stars and the red border do kind of evoke a communist feel, which is a theme throughout a fair few of Orwell's books, so it does work quite well, versus just like this big blue and white eyeball. So I like the new one. Like, what else am I meant to say about the old cover? It's a big blue and white eyeball. Great. Next up is The Book Thief. I've actually mentioned this one in my original covers to movie tie-in covers video, but this time I'm comparing the two different original covers. One has a load of dice lined up ready to domino down, and one has Liesl dancing with death. I prefer Liesl dancing with death so much. It makes sense. I understand that the dominoes on the table are most likely supposed to represent like Liesl's family table, the home, possibly even individuals in the home just kind of like living a normal home life, but it doesn't seem that evocative of what's happening in the actual book. Whereas with Liesl dancing with death, it says on the synopsis that death is going to visit her 3 times, and so it kind of establishes the fact that she's dancing around death, like dancing around death as this kind of colloquialism that we use to mean avoiding death, but death is also rooting for Liesl, so then it also shows their partnership. So I think that it's a lot more evocative and a lot more accurate to the book. Then we've got The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, another one that was in my screen to book one. I still do not like the original one. I don't like it. I like the theme it portrays, but I just don't like the actual style. Whereas this newer one from the vintage publication of books, I like better. I don't really like either of them, to be perfectly honest, but I'm gonna pick the mainly white one. It does show them all as exactly the same, all as homogeneous, like there's no differentiation, they're not individuals, so it still does evoke the book whilst having a simple cover. Then for a slight break from just the two, we have 3. I will mention the third one in a minute, and that is The Hunger Games. So as far as I can tell, this seems to be more of a US-UK split, so I'm going to show them and then I'm going to show the change. So I think that this is the US one and this is the UK one, or at least this is the one I've seen most in my life. I'm British, if you couldn't tell. And I like them both. I think they both do well. The UK one has got like the people in Hunger Games, and it shows like blood spatters in the red. The US one very much shows like the distinct districts being linked together. I prefer the UK one just for nostalgia reasons, but I think they're pretty comparable. So I'm just going to pop the UK one up here, just because it's my cover. This is the one they... Why is it neon? Like, the thing that bothers me the most is that I don't mind it. We actually had this in the UK as well. I know it's been in the US and we had it in the UK too. I think that the kind of spray paint style works quite well in that it could be like rebellious teenagers against the Capitol, like spraying this around like graffiti art, and it still does have, of course, the Mockingjay symbol. But why are they neon? I don't understand how these neon ones link to Man the Beast, so I'm sticking with the original one here. Then we've got Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I haven't read this one, and if you can't guess which one I'm going to pick, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like, look at the new one, It's got these beautiful flowers on the bottom with the swirling vine-like patterns in gold with this beautiful text versus a photograph of somebody curled up and a badly done title. Like, I'm sure that that's evocative of what's actually in the book in terms of what she's doing, but the newer one's prettier. And then we've got Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. So this is actually technically a film versus original, but the film one, if you took away the sticker on it, would actually be really plain, and I would probably pick it over the two. And that's what I'm doing in this instance, is I'm picking the film cover. But to me, this is more of just like a cover change because it is still quite neutral. You don't see the actor's face, which I love so much. So this just could be any kid. But then also, with the original one, the drawing, the art style just isn't my favourite. It's quite muted and not distinctive, so that's not my favourite. But then also the waves is confusing me. I don't know if this is part of the story, but in the book version he doesn't have any water around him. Now maybe he's not supposed to, but like in the film version he's got water splashing up around him, and that just seems more realistic in the kind of weather that we've got. Other than that, the two covers are really similar. It's just an artistic preference. I like the newer one. And those are all of the cover changes that I'm going to be mentioning today. Which ones do you prefer? It also would be interesting to know if you grew up mostly seeing newer or older covers. Because if you are older, or if you grew up with mostly like second-hand books and seeing older covers, you might prefer those ones versus me having grown up with modern covers. So I have a preference for the modern looking covers. So it's really interesting to know. So as always, I'll have a list of the books in the description box down below, so you can copy and paste that into the comment and then just say if you prefer the old one or the new one. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I look forward to seeing what you say is your preference down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!